This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Regional reactions to the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire. China welcomes the truce, while Japan pledges support, calling for the deal to be fully implemented. Now, China warns Taiwan against pursuing independence as President William Lai heads for a Pacific tour with a U.S. stopover. Meanwhile, security officials say that Beijing could launch military drills around the island in the coming days. Now, is Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun under investigation for corruption? If confirmed, he would be the third consecutive defense minister, current or former, to face such a probe. We've got China's official response. Plus, members of a Ukrainian delegation touched down in South Korea, and President Yoon Suk-yeol has already met them. Reports suggesting that potential support for Ukraine's fight against Russia is up for discussion, with weapons aid on the agenda. Also in East Asia tonight, South Korea's capital blanketed by the heaviest ever November snowfall, grounding hundreds of flights and leaving thousands of households without power. The global space race is on, and East Asian nations are going big on their off-world missions. But that comes at a price, with the debris and litter cluttering Earth's orbit. What are the risks, and what can be done? We ask an expert. World leaders have welcomed a 60-day truce in the war between Israel and Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah that had threatened to escalate into a region-wide conflict. Now, many countries, including those here in East Asia, urging both sides to respect full implementation of the ceasefire.
中方高度关注当前离异局势，一直呼吁各方切实遵守联合国安理会第1701号决议。 我们支持一切有利于缓解紧張局勢、實現和平的努力，歡迎有關方面就停火達成一致。
今回の合意を受けまして、すべての当事者が停戦合意を完全に履行し、地域の安定にコミットすべく最大限の措置を講じることを強く求めてまいります。
South Korea also welcomed the truce deal that was brokered by the United States and France and acknowledged the parties involved. A ceasefire, which aims to end almost 14 months of fighting, appears to be holding, just hours after Lebanon suffered an intense bombardment by Israeli forces. Reports say displaced residents are already heading to South Lebanon through the IDF, and though the IDF and Lebanese army are warning residents to not return home just yet. A few hours before the truce came into effect, Syria's defense ministry reported that 6 people were killed by Israeli strikes on border crossings with Lebanon. The ministry says the death toll included 2 soldiers, while the rest were civilians, including children, women, and Syrian Arab Red Crescent workers. A ceasefire was announced by U.S. President Joe Biden. He hailed the agreement, co-brokered with the help of France, saying it would clear the path for wider peace in the region. Calling the conflict the deadliest in decades, Mr. Biden said it will stop Iran-backed Hezbollah from attacking Israel further.
The fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities. What is left of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations will not be allowed, well, I emphasize, will not be allowed to threaten the security of Israel again.
Under the deal, the truce will span 60 days, during which the Lebanese army will deploy and take control of its territory once again. Hezbollah infrastructure that was destroyed, including tunnels near the border, will not be allowed to be rebuilt. Israel will withdraw its forces, and civilians from both sides will be allowed to return to their homes in the border areas. Meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned that the IDF will strike Lebanon again if Hezbollah violates the deal and threatens Israel further. Giving 3 reasons for the ceasefire, he said it would allow Israel to focus on its priorities.
סיבה ראשונה, התמקדות באיום האיראני, ולא ארחיב על כך. סיבה שנייה, רענון כוחות וחידוש מלאים. ואני אומר לכם בגלוי, כי זה לא סוד. היו עיכובים גדולים באספקת נשק וחימושים, והעיכוב הזה עומד להשתחרר בקרוב. נצטייד באמצעי לחימה מתקדמים שישמרו על חיי חיילינו ויתנו לנו כוח מחץ נוסף להשלים את משימותינו. וסיבה שלישית להפסקת אש, ניתוק הזירה ובידוד החמאס.
With the ceasefire deal to pause the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah now in effect, it puts a stop to months of hostilities. Well, the truce between the two sides is said to be based on the UN Security Council's Resolution 1701. It was adopted back in 2006 to end a month-long war between Israel and Hezbollah. The resolution has been credited for being the cornerstone of long-term stability along the border, though both sides have complained of violations through the years. Well, under the resolution, Israel and Lebanon must respect the border between them, called the Blue Line. The Lebanese army and UN peacekeeping forces, called UNIFIL, would be the only armed groups in a buffer zone between the Blue Line and Lebanon's Litani River. Now, all armed groups in Lebanon had to disarm, including Hezbollah, and no arms could be sold in the country without government authorization. And this paved the way for a fragile truce over the years, despite persistent tensions. Well, now the hope is that with the latest ceasefire in place, Israel and Lebanon can begin talks to properly demarcate their land border. And Sarah Coates tells us if Israel is expecting the truce to hold and if it increases the likelihood of a similar deal in Gaza.
It is a 60-day cessation of hostilities. During that time, Lebanese military will be deployed down south of the Litani River, also jointly with bolstered UNIFIL presence, and they will be responsible for ensuring that Hezbollah fighters are moved back north behind the Litani River, and also that this area is cleared of heavy weaponry. Now, this will be overseen by a five-party body. It will be headed up by the United States. Still no violations, as it seems, but we have been hearing from the IDF warning these residents from southern Lebanon not to return home yet, but there really is a mass sort of exodus of cars being seen leaving Beirut, the capital, heading south, trying to get back home despite these warnings. Now, also in northern Israel, residents have been told not to go home yet, but certainly this is something that we can expect to see if this ceasefire does hold in the coming weeks, the coming months. The attention is now turning to the situation in Gaza, the catastrophic situation in Gaza. We did hear from US President Biden when he did make that announcement last night. He said that alongside Qatar, Turkey and Egypt, the United States will really be working to renew this push for a ceasefire and a hostage release in Gaza after around 14 months of fighting and more than 44,000 people dead. Now, Israel has been saying that it will remain in Gaza until Gaza poses no threat to the people of southern Israel anymore. And we did hear from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, last night. He said this war will continue until all of these 101 Israeli hostages are released. But certainly we can now expect a renewed push. We did hear from the United States yesterday. It did send with this top envoy, Brett McGurk, to Saudi Arabia, basically saying that this ceasefire in Lebanon could potentially be a catalyst for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Well, earlier we spoke with Sedomir Nestorovic, professor of geopolitics at the ESSEC Business School, Asia Pacific, and he explained why Israel and Hezbollah agreed to the deal now and what it would take for the deal to hold even after the 60 days are up.
They think that both parties are anxious in order to settle the deal before President Trump comes to office. So I believe that both sides have a very big interest in holding the ceasefire for the moment.
Who is monitoring the implementation of the ceasefire, and how will they ensure that neither side violates it?
So that's the problem that we have, because we don't have an international commission, we don't have international monitors of the agreement that we have for the ceasefire. So we have to trust both sides that nothing will come in the future. But maybe in the future, if the ceasefire is holding, they will set up a special commission or a special committee in order to monitor the ceasefire.
U.S. President Joe Biden had said the deal was meant to be a permanent ceasefire, but the agreement is only good for 60 days. Help us understand, how exactly will this work?
So I think that during the 60 days, they will try their best in order to secure the freedom of the hostages on one side, and on the other side, they want to be sure that Israel doesn't intervene in Gaza as it has intervened before. So on both sides, we have to give guarantees that something tangible is coming out from the ceasefire. It is not only the ceasefire that they are stopping fighting, but we need some tangible elements outside of it.
Looking at both the sides involved, Hezbollah had previously vowed to continue fighting Israel until it ends its war in Gaza, while the right-wing Israelis argue that a ceasefire now is a lost opportunity to eliminate Hezbollah. So why have both sides agreed to this deal now? What brought them together?
Well, you're right. We had the maximum demands. So on both sides, that is on Hezbollah and for Israel, they had the maximum demands, which are maybe unrealistic. That is, they will never accomplish them. So in the meantime, they will look for something which is optimal result today. And the optimal result is the ceasefire, the liberation of the hostages, and to stop the intervention of Israel in Gaza. So I think that is the optimal and the realistic outcome that we can have, rather than having some maximal objectives that could not be realized.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the ceasefire will let Israel focus on the Iranian threat. What exactly does he mean? Are we just going to see a shift in the conflict?
I believe that if the ceasefire holds, in that case, they can free some of the engaged units that we have in Gaza and put them in Lebanon or in some other places, because they expect that Iran will not stay idle, and they expect that maybe Iran will continue its operations against Israel. So they need troops in order to do so. But if the troops are stretched in Gaza, they cannot answer this kind of demand. So I believe that from his point of view, it is better to have a ceasefire in order to concentrate on a bigger threat, which is coming from Iran and the Hezbollah.
So what does this mean for Gaza then? Could a ceasefire there be on the cards?
So the ceasefire is the only way for the Gazans in order to have some life, because so far they have been pushed towards the very limit of the existence. So in fact, they don't have any other hope than the ceasefire today. So the ceasefire will not resolve the situation, but at least it will stop the operations that we have today.
Could the ceasefire improve humanitarian efforts in the region?
Everyone is hoping for that. Everyone is hoping that we can open some more doors, especially from the Egyptian side, in order to deliver the help and aid to the Gazan population. So this is obviously what they have in mind, because they cannot continue to have this kind of conflict forever.
Chinese authorities have repeated their warnings to Taiwan against seeking independence. They've spoken ahead of an upcoming trip to the Pacific by the island's President William Lai, who will include a stopover in the U.S.
台湾当局领导人所谓过境，本质上是以外谋独。任何企图制造“一中一台”、“两个中国”等违反一个中国原则的挑衅行径，都必将遭到全体中国人民的反对。我们敦促美方恪守一个中国原则和中美3个联合公报规定，停止向台独势力发出 任何错误信号。
Mr. Lai will start his trip to Taipei's 3 remaining allies in the Pacific this Saturday, with stops planned for in Hawaii and the U.S. territory of Guam. Details of the official stopovers in America have yet to be confirmed. Well, Beijing views self-ruled Taiwan as its own territory and has often labeled Mr. Lai as a separatist. Taiwanese officials have cautioned that Beijing is likely to launch military drills in the coming days near the island in response to Mr. Lai's trip. China has already staged 2 rounds of major exercises around Taiwan this year. Around 20 to 30 Chinese naval vessels are involved in ongoing military maneuvers this week in the South China Sea. Now, China has suggested that a report claiming that Defense Minister Dong Jin is under a graft probe is unfounded.
英国金融时报报道，中国国防部长董军涉贪被查的可能性，发言人对此有何回应？
捕风捉影。
According to the Financial Times report that cites current and former U.S. officials familiar with the situation, the investigation into Mr. Dong is part of a broader anti-graft drive in the Chinese military that has deepened over the past year. If confirmed, he would be the 3rd serving or former defense minister in a row to fall under investigation for corruption. Dong Jin was appointed China's defense minister in December last year. Now, his predecessor, Li Shangfu, was removed 7 months into the role. Mr. Li and the ex-defense minister before him, Wei Fenghe, were both expelled from the Communist Party for, quote, serious violations of discipline. The phrase is commonly used as a euphemism for corruption. Mr. Dong last week declined a meeting with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at an ASEAN gathering in Laos. China's defense ministry said that the refusal was over America's approval of a weapons package for Taiwan. At recent government and Communist Party events, Mr. Dong was not named to positions traditionally appointed to the defense minister. All right, breaks next, but coming up in East Asia tonight, Chinese industrial profits continuing their slide last month, though the pace has slowed. Plus, South Korean giant Samsung reshuffles its top brass to close the gap in the AI market. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. It is now time to get you up to speed in business news with Olivia Mazuki. And Liv, it seems that the cat's out of the bag because Trump's team, they've actually announced a name for the key role of U.S. trade rep. And he's not exactly a complete stranger, is he?
Not at all, Otelli, not a complete stranger to Trump. He's someone who's been in Trump's first-term cabinet and is known to be a China skeptic. Jamieson Greer, an advocate for strategic decoupling from China, is the president-elect's pick to be the next trade representative. If confirmed by the Senate, Mr. Greer is expected to play a pivotal role in shaping Trump's tariffs on U.S. imports. Now, Trump has lauded Mr. Greer for his role as the chief for the staff to then U.S. Trade Rep Robert Lighthizer in his first administration. He said Mr. Greer had been a key player in combating unfair trade practices against China and other countries. Analysts say that they expect Mr. Greer to continue taking a hard line on China, warning that trade ties between Washington and Beijing will be, quote, on a tighter rope. Mr. Greer had recommended several policies, including action to prevent Chinese companies from relocating to other countries in order to dodge U.S. tariffs. And this could lead to higher tariffs on Chinese goods made in places such as Mexico. He's also called for expanding export controls on Beijing to cover a wider range of critical industries, such as aircraft and transportation equipment. This would be a step up from the current U.S. controls, which mainly focus on advanced semiconductors. Earlier this week, Mr. Trump vowed to slap an extra 10% tariffs on Chinese imports unless Beijing takes a more aggressive action against the flow of fentanyl precursors. China's state media has warned that this threat to impose additional tariffs could lead to a mutually destructive trade war. Now, the tariff threats raise significant concerns for China's economy that's already grappling with yet another drop in corporate profits as deflation in the country takes its toll. Industrial profits fell 10% in October from a year ago, mainly hit by deeper factory gate deflation. That narrowed the 27% on-year plunge the month before. But analysts said that is due to a higher base of comparison in the same period last year. The profit numbers cover industrial firms with annual revenues of at least $2.8 million from their main operations. The figures underscore the need for more stimulus measures to boost domestic demand and ease deflationary pressures. Well, Greater China markets closed substantially higher today, despite a looming trade war, and Shanghai, Shenzhen, Hang Seng all clocking gains, pretty significant gains for Shenzhen. They're leading the charge 2.2% at the closing bell. The specter of unfavorable policies from the incoming Trump administration also sending jitters to the semiconductor industry. Governments in the region are gearing up to bolster their tech industries from the looming headwinds. South Korea is reportedly looking at a $10 billion financial package to shore up its industry, besides plans to impose tariffs of up to 20% on all imports. Mr. Trump has also signaled intentions to roll back subsidies for chips and EVs from the Biden administration, and that is a bid to reduce reliance on foreign supply chains. South Korean Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok said, given the global economic shifts, the role of the government must, quote, evolve to be a player that's working alongside businesses. The $10 billion support package includes measures such as loans, insurances, and guarantees from state-affiliated organizations. There are also plans to expand graduate programs specializing in chips to tackle workforce challenges in the industry. South Korea had already rolled out an $18.6 billion aid package in July, part of which will be reflected in next year's support amount. Separately, the government will seek to increase the tax credit rate for chip-related firms by 10 percentage points and build a national AI computing center worth nearly $2 billion by 2030. The proposal is still pending parliamentary approval. Staying in South Korea, Samsung Electronics has announced a sweeping reshuffle of its top management. More responsibility is given to the head of chip business just 6 months after taking the helm. And this comes as the South Korean giant seeks to regain its competitiveness in the looming and the booming AI chip market. John Young-hyun, who was appointed to lead the semiconductor division back in May, has taken on the role of co-CEO, and this will grant him direct oversight of the day-to-day operations. Samsung also appointed Han Jin-man as the new head for its contract for foundry division. The move comes amid concerns regarding Samsung's ability to catch up with rivals SK Hynix and Taiwan's TSMC in supplying high-end chips to NVIDIA. Last month, Samsung apologized for a 40% profit plunge at the division, saying that its AI chip unit has suffered a delay. The leadership change also comes as Chairman Lee Chae-yong faces legal challenges. Shares of Samsung down pretty significantly, more than 3% at the close. It is a sign that the reshuffle did little to quell concerns about rising competition and the policy risks ahead of Donald Trump's second term. You're up to date in business. Oteli, it's back to you.
Well, thanks so very much, Olivia Marzuki there. All right, we're going to go for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Donald Trump reportedly looking to break the ice with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, with his team weighing the possibility of direct talks. Regional reactions to the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire. China welcomes the truce, while Japan pledges support, calling for the deal to be fully implemented. China reiterates its warnings to Taiwan against pursuing independence as President William Lai heads for a Pacific tour with a U.S. stopover. China suggests a report claiming that Defense Minister Dong Jin is under investigation for corruption is unfounded. South Korea says that President Yoon Suk-yeol has met with a Ukrainian envoy sent by his counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian delegation, led by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, arrived in the country earlier today, and media reports suggest that Kyiv will be asking Seoul for weapons aid. The visit comes a month after the two countries' leaders held talks over the phone. Mr. Zelensky said that he would send a team of special envoys to discuss ways Seoul could better support Kyiv against North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. Well, the Ukrainian defense minister will reportedly share intelligence on Pyongyang's troop dispatch to Russia. The South China Morning Post reports that Kyiv's delegation may request for weapons aid from Seoul, including air defense missiles and artillery systems. South Korean law prohibits it from sending arms to war zones, but President Yoon Suk-yeol said that Seoul will not rule out the possibility of providing weapons, following North Korea's reported involvement in the war in Ukraine. North Korea, meanwhile, has condemned anti-regime leaflets flown from its southern neighbor, with Kim Yo-jong, a sister to leader Kim Jong-un, calling it political agitation. A state-run television, KRT, has shown partially blurred photographs of what it claims are the leaflets sent over using balloons. Ms. Kim says the affected areas are being cordoned off and the leaflets being collected. The two Koreas have clashed over trash-carrying balloons floated from Pyongyang since May, with relations hitting new lows. North Korea says the launches are a response to balloons sent by anti-regime activists in the south. A U.S. President-elect Donald Trump and his team are reportedly considering to hold direct talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to pick up from where they left off and lower the risks of armed conflict. A Reuters report citing sources says that several people in Mr. Trump's team see a direct approach as most likely to break the ice with Mr. Kim by building on an already existing relationship. Mr. Trump, during his 2017 to 2021 presidency, held 3 separate meetings with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, Hanoi, and at the Korean border. Now, at the time, Washington demanded Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear weapons, while North Korea, in return, requested full sanctions relief, but their diplomacy did not bring concrete results. Pyongyang has ignored 4 years of outreach by the U.S. since Joe Biden came into office. In recent months, Mr. Kim expanded his country's missile arsenal and built a strategic partnership with Russia, including sending troops to support Moscow in its war against Ukraine. South Korea's capital is experiencing its worst November snowstorm in more than 50 years that's causing travel chaos and power outages. At least 220 flights have been cancelled or delayed, and around 90 ferries ordered to remain at port. Multiple road accidents have been reported amid icy road conditions, while some households are facing power outages. Authorities issued a heavy snow warning for badly hit areas, urging residents to refrain from engaging in outdoor activities and to be careful of falling trees as emergency workers work to clear roads and respond to safety risks. President Yoon Suk-yeol called on officials to minimize the potential damage and inconvenience caused to the public. The weather agency is predicting more snowfall in most parts of the country until noon tomorrow, with up to 20 centimeters of extra snow expected around Seoul. Now, turning our attention to mental health, the Malaysian government will table an online safety bill in Parliament in December, nearly 6 months after the death of an influencer who had been cyberbullied. Well, the case highlighted risks faced by social media users, especially women, and the need for stronger protections against online harm and harassment. Well, CNA's Afifa Arifin with this report.
30-year-old Rajaswari Apahu, better known as Aisha, was a social media influencer with over 200,000 followers on TikTok. On 5th July 2024, Aisha was found dead at her home in Kuala Lumpur. Just a day earlier, she had lodged a police report against 2 individuals, accusing them of online harassment. It's believed she took her own life after enduring relentless threats for more than a month.
Saya mau tengok pasal apa anak saya bunuh diri. Saya mau tahu, saya ibu dia. Sampai sekarang saya tak boleh tidur malam pukul 3 ni macam semuanya sedih. Anak saya mati.
Aisha's case was investigated under laws for criminal intimidation and online harassment. 2 people were found guilty. 44-year-old B. Satish Kumar was sentenced to a year behind bars for verbal assaults he made on TikTok, while 35-year-old Shalini Periyasamy was fined 100 ringgit or some $20 for using foul language on the social media platform. The sentences triggered public outrage. Netizens flooded social media with comments condemning the perpetrators and highlighting the growing problem of cyberbullying. National figures show over 9,000 cyberbullying reports in the past 3 years, with an estimated 10 cases occurring daily. Activists say existing laws are insufficient to deter the crime.
As of current, our laws do not statutorily define cyberbullying or bullying. Though we do have legislations currently, like the Penal Code and the Communications and Multimedia Act, to sort of address or tackle online harms, but it's definitely not comprehensive, it's not robust enough.
The ongoing conversation about online safety has revealed a pressing concern: the need for a more gender-sensitive approach.
Now, according to a global report in 2021, 85% of women experience online violence. While Malaysia lacks gender-specific data, NGOs estimate that the number of cyber crimes against women here are equally critical and on the rise.
Public outrage over Aisha's case stirred the government into action. Communications Minister Fahmi Fazil met with Aisha's family, promising reforms. In August, Malaysia announced new regulations requiring social media and messaging platforms with over 8 million local users to apply for licenses. A code of conduct for platforms is also being drafted, with licensing rules set to take effect in 2025. Meanwhile, a comprehensive online safety bill is also set to be tabled in Parliament this December, with the aim to close legal loopholes and foster a safer digital environment. Afifa Arifin, CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
Also, if you or someone you know requires emotional support, do reach out to your local agencies. In Singapore, you can call these helplines. And for more on the global fight to end violence against women, watch CNA correspondent Voices Unbound tonight at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. And you can also watch it on cna.asia or on YouTube. Now, antidepressants, also nicknamed happy pills, are used to treat mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety. Well, last year, more than 50,000 people in Singapore were prescribed the medication. Some were young adults, a group that's increasingly put on the pills. Now, but its use can come with a cost and some unwanted side effects. Well, this week's Talking Point explores the benefits and risks of using them. Sarah Gross and Sneha Surendran joined CNA's Julie Yu and Arnold Gay in the studio to tell us more.
There has been a lot of more focus on raising mental health awareness and seeking treatment and getting help. But the conversation tends to end there, and there's this assumption that once someone has sought treatment, it's all good. Yeah. Okay. So what we want to do in this episode is to really focus on the treatment aspect and how there are some complexities. So to do that, we're focusing specifically on antidepressants, which is the medication that's not just used to treat symptoms of depression, but other things as well, even OCD, anxiety disorders, even binge eating disorders. In fact, the host of our show, Shrey, shares his own personal experience of how antidepressants helped him. But while they play a role in helping people to function a bit better in life, we want to explore the different aspects of it. For example, side effects. You know, what's it like to be on this medication daily and deal with some of the side effects? So to give you guys a preview, we have a clip of some young adults talking about what it's like to take antidepressants and have those side effects.
There was a specific side effect that I felt the moment I took antidepressant, and that was having an energy ball in my chest. It was very palpable because I could feel it. It spread through my chest, and this repeated on multiple times.
I love to talk. But the moment I took the medication, I just stopped talking. I just wanted to be alone. I just wanted to lock myself in my rooms and just sleep throughout the day.
The nausea was the worst, man. I remember actually marching, and I couldn't even march straight. Or the first few days when I was taking it, it was actually pretty dang bad.
So when I started taking antidepressants, I already felt even worse when I expected to feel better.
All right, Sneha, so we just saw you mentioning some side effects of your own. Did it come as a surprise? It was supposed to make you feel better, right?
Yeah, but I didn't really expect it to be this effective. I was lost. No one around me knew what was happening to me. Even I didn't know what was going on with me. I was just not myself. I just constantly wanted the medication and not wanting it. So I didn't really know what was the side effects supposed to help me. Yeah. So in that way, I was very, very shocked. Yeah.
Okay, which is really surprising, given that they're called happy pills. No one there seemed to be happy at all. So Sarah, other than some of these side effects that were briefly mentioned by Sneha and the others you spoke to, I mean, did you learn anything else alarming about the risks of, going on antidepressants?
Yeah, so I mean, a common thing that was mentioned, like Sneha mentioned, was it took a while before they could find the effects of the medication. But for us, we want to look specifically at age group. Were the side effects different for young adults, for example? So there has been some clinical research done in the past to show that those below the age of 25 could possibly have increased or worsening thoughts of suicidal ideation.
With the pills?
With the medication. But of course, there has been research over the past decade to also question the validity of that. Okay. So what we've done in this episode is to explore really how pertinent that warning should be placed on the medication, because it's actually different in other countries. In the US, for example, it's called a black box warning. So it's bolded text, it's in a border, it appears right at the front, it's very prominent. But in other countries like Singapore, the warning is there, but you can't really find it so much. You have to kind of scroll through and see where it is. So we find out, how important that warning should be placed, and also should we really be concerned about this?
And Sneha, you were just 17, such a young age when you were prescribed antidepressants. What do you think, in hindsight, what could have been done better for you to be more prepared and feel more supported?
Because when they gave me the medication, right, they didn't really give me the side effects. It wasn't the psychiatrist that told me, it was the pharmacist. So when I went in to collect the medication, my parents were there with me, but they didn't come in with me. Yeah, so they didn't know what was going to go, what's going to happen, or what I'm going to feel, or how bad the side effects is going to be. So I was all alone throughout. Yeah, and then they didn't really I think they could have sat me down, my parents, to explain what could feel and
in full the potential side effects and what to expect when you go on the medication. Wow. So is that something you feel is very important in terms of getting people who may be put on antidepressants?
I think definitely the side effects, because it wasn't easy going through it, and then also the whole prolong of seeing my next appointment was 4 weeks.
Wow,
so the entire 4 weeks, I was just going through this alone, without knowing if I'm supposed to feel this way or not.
Okay.
Yeah, and my parents didn't know what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if they only were to check in weekly or 2 weeks once to let me know.
Giving you some reassurance, for example. Okay, yeah, that's an important point.
Well, we can catch the 1 hour Talking Point special, The Happy Pill, What Is It Doing to Us? Tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. And you can also watch it on MediaCorp's Channel 5 or online on CNA Video On Demand or MeWatch. Right, time now to go for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, debris are threatening the safety of the orbit around Earth. Amid the boom in the space economy, who should bear the cost? Well, we'll be speaking with an expert to find out more. Well, the global space industry is booming. It could, by a McKinsey estimate, be worth some $1.8 trillion in the next 10 years. Now, that's almost tripling the $600+ billion sector presently. Now, this growth comes with the increased use of space-based or space-enabled technology found in areas such as communications, Earth observation, and space exploration. Private firms as well as government-funded space organizations are key drivers. In East Asia, China has been on a roll this year when it comes to showcasing its space ambitions. The country just carried out its 58th space launch today, sending 2 test satellites into planned orbits. Now, neighboring Japan and South Korea as well have their own space programs. This means there will be a lot more rocket launches to come. With that comes certain risks. So derelict satellites and fragments from previous launches are already cluttering orbits. More launches will only add to that. And the experts are saying that the crowded space around Earth could increase the chances of deadly collisions. Fragments traveling at high speed could threaten the integrity of other satellites and the safety of astronauts. A number of new firms are hoping to come up with a solution. A Japanese startup, Astroscale, for example, wants to reduce the buildup by harvesting space junk using a satellite equipped with a robotic arm. And to help us understand a little bit more about all of this, we are joined now by Kazuto Suzuki. Now, he's a professor from the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo, and he's speaking to us from Kobe. Well, thanks so very much for joining us this evening, Professor. I want to pick up from that report we mentioned earlier about what's really about interesting is this Astroscale's robot arm and how it can effectively reduce space debris. And considering, right, Professor, that I read up that there are some 130 million objects ranging from 1 millimeter to 10 centimeter in size, how effective is this technology?
Well, of course, this technology cannot reduce all the debris, but I think the most important thing is the bigger ones, with 2 metric tons or more. And if there is a breakup of this large debris, then it will create more smaller debris, and that will create another debris. So that is called the Kessler syndrome. We need to avoid this Kessler syndrome and try to reduce from the bigger ones in order to avoid this increasing number of debris by creating debris by itself.
So, in a nutshell, who is responsible for clearing up and dealing with all this space debris? Because I'm wondering regulations, I mean, how can that be enforced when we're talking about involving multiple countries and private companies are also being involved?
Right. So there is no regulation at this moment who is responsible for the debris or clean up the debris. But I think we can use some analogy of the oceanic environmental degradation. There are a possibility of those responsibility to bear by those who are polluters. So polluter pay principle is going to be one of the way to go, so that all the countries which created debris is responsible for reducing the debris.
So you mentioned that at this point, no one is responsible, right now, because is it then clear to say that there is no clear plan for decommissioning or disposal?
There are some plans. It depends on the operators and launch operators. Some launch operators, including JAXA, is now considering that taking out the debris which JAXA created is JAXA's responsibility. So now they are sending a probe called the Address J to monitor the debris, and to CRD2, which is to reduce or remove the debris, which is the upper stage of rocket. And also there are other satellite operators, such as OneWeb, which is contracting with Astroscale to remove any satellites which are no longer functional. So if they create the debris, it is the responsibility of the operators and the companies to reduce debris. And I think this is largely because it has a lot of impact on the reputation and the company's responsibility, so that it would impact on the way in which that companies behave, and investors and the stockholders will evaluate the reputations and those responsibilities.
So if, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that the operators and the companies should bear the cost of dealing with space debris. But is it a very clear-cut thing when you see a piece of debris in space and you know, like, which company, this piece of debris comes from?
Yes, there are something called the SSA, the Space Situational Awareness. This is to monitor any movement of the space object, including the debris and all these operational satellites. So these are cataloged under the command of the United States Space Forces, and in collaboration with the other space, other military and the commercial players. So this catalog will identify which debris is created by whom. So all these the catalog will, of course, it can only go up to the size of the 10-centimeter diameter.
Right.
But these are the catalog which identifies the polluters.
Yeah, appreciate you clarifying that. Are there any economic incentives or disincentives that can actually be implemented to encourage responsible behavior in the first place?
That's a good question, and currently there are several ideas floating around, one of which is the insurance. If the company is not taking a responsible behavior in space, then the insurance pay for those satellite fleets is going to be much higher. The premium is going to be higher because those companies are not behaving responsibly for reducing the risks in the space. So this is one of the incentives, and also there are incentives by the international organization, but I think this is still a long way to go, and I think the economic incentive comes mainly from the insurance business.
Now, we've talked about Astroscale's robot arm that effectively reduces space debris. Do you know of what are some of the other emerging technologies you could share with us that hold promise to help us clear space debris?
Well, there are a number of different types of debris removal technology is emerging, one of which is using the radar to reduce the speed of the space object so that it will automatically goes down to the gravity. The other one is to capture with the net, so that it is like catching a fish, and because often the space objects, the debris, are rotating, so that it will be very difficult to capture in a static way. So throwing a net and the fix the movement will be another technology. It is always difficult to find the right balance of the laws of physics. I mean, space is a very tough place to play because there is no gravity. There is a very high-speed moving objects. So there are a lot of technologies which are in the test, but probably the Astroscale's robotic arm and with a magnet is one of the most secure approach to capture debris.
Well, that was a very insightful conversation. I certainly learned something new today, the Casimir syndrome. That's very interesting. I'm going to read up more on that. Really appreciate your time and thoughts, Professor Kazuto Suzuki from the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo. Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up East Asia tonight, this Wednesday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.